What's up, guys? In the last few videos, we've been working on the lower part of the upper terrace, adding a few new buildings, a new farmhouse, and now it needs a centerpiece to make this area feel a little bit more impactful. So what you're seeing on the screen is the end goal of today's video. It's a simple build, but the process of building it was super enjoyable, and I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. I started this build off as simple as I could because if you overcomplicate a build early in the building process, it's so much harder to come back to change that build once you get down the road. So I wanted kind of a cylinder type tower directly in the middle of the lower part of the city we're working on, and I kind of wanted it to have more of a boxy hexagon type feel on the exterior. And the way that I did this was I played around with the pine cone walls a little bit because they add that extra bit of texture and that extra bit of layering that you don't really get from the rest of the building pieces currently in the game. And from there, the benefit of kind of starting small and simple also is that you get to play around with a ton of different patterns and progressively change those over the course of a build. So what you're kind of seeing here is the small triangle pieces are used so much in massive builds, and they're used so much in all builds because they allow you to play around with these unique type shapes that you can't do with anything else. So all I'm doing here is trying to figure out, what do I even want this tower to look like before I progress through the entire build? Because if you don't have a good idea for a build and you don't have that set in stone up front, there's no reason to try to complete this build up front, right? We're taking our time, we're trying out different shapes, different types of unique patterns throughout in order to get to a place in this build that we know we want to move forward before we ever do. So I kind of played around with this over the course of maybe 20 minutes or so. And honestly, what you're seeing now, I really like this pattern. It's used throughout a ton of builds, as I mentioned, and it's not unique to just me, but it does add that extra bit of uniqueness to the builds in the area. So I started also kind of adding some additional texturing with some of the mushroom type stem parts. And the best thing about this build is that I want it to be that centerpiece, right? I want it to grab your attention when you look down here compared to the other buildings. The other ones are super unique that we built in the last few videos, and they stand out on their own. But each area I add throughout the upper terrace, I want them to have something that grabs your attention when you look there. And that's the point of this specific tower in the middle, is that, yeah, every build we've done is unique. It has different textures, different materials, different design patterns, all of these things, but we want something that takes your attention away and grabs it first. So that's what we're working through in this part of the video, is I want to add these additional details and take the time to add the additional, like I mentioned, layering and some of the additional textures that we didn't add in the others, because it is the standout piece for this part of the build. And looking at how this turned out in the very early stages, the best part about building this way is I can already determine if I like this with a quick flyover rather than coming back after the whole build is done. From here, I'm just basically playing around with more exterior details for the tower, and honestly, this is the part of the building process that you should learn to fall in love with the most, because you're not trying to get that final production type part right out of this, type of process. What you're instead trying to do is see how these pieces fit together. How can you make them look, again, like a standout part of this build, instead of just trying to copy paste everything that you've ever done or everything that you've seen other people do. You really get to let your creative mind kind of run rampant in this part, because this is the part of the design where you are actually in control of everything that kind of deems what this build is going to look like. So the detail work is the funnest part, of course, of any build that you're working on, rather than, again, that final production part, because this is the part where you're having the most fun exploring how the parts fit and overall what your skill set is kind of grown into from all of your other prior projects. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just kind of playing around. I'm moving some pieces that maybe needed to be shifted a little bit, replacing some pieces, and just trying to get a feel for, what do I want this build to look like in the end. And I knew I wanted to add some additional pieces that I hadn't used to this point, so I played around with some of the snake skin scale type rooftop pieces just to kind of fill in some of those gaps and kind of add as a centerpiece at the very top of this, which gave it a really good look and feel, I think, and separates this one, of course, from the other builds, as I mentioned, because I'm using these unique pieces I just haven't used at this point that I've kind of been gathering resources on for a while now. And the other awesome part of this part, kind of closing in at the end of a build, is that this final detail work makes or breaks it, right? So we've taken our time, we've added all these pieces that look pretty good, and we kind of like the detail work we've done, and we've reworked some of it if we didn't like what we did. But now once you're getting to the final parts, this is what closes this project off for the time being. You're adding this additional layer of details to it in order to make sure that the build satisfies what you wanted out of that build, right? So again, if it's something functional, you're wanting to add the correct stations and make those set up in a way that it's easy to use them, right? You're not going to build this massive mushroom farm as a functional part of your base that the mushrooms are spread out 100 meters per each one, because that's ridiculous having to try to run around and grab all of those. So you have to have that end goal, of course, as I've mentioned several times, of what this build needs to satisfy it for you. So in this case, I'm adding these details to make it separate and stand out from everything else, and that is my goal, is that this is a aesthetic build, not a functional build. So as I'm adding these pieces, that is the only thing that I have in mind, is how do I make this build aesthetically pleasing for this area of the base, rather than trying to make it something functional or massive in size. I'm just looking for small aesthetics at this point. And honestly, looking at the final build, I think that I achieved that exactly how I had it in my mind, because we used some pieces that I've never used before, and I kind of pushed myself to play around with some patterns and some shapes that I really haven't used to this point. And I think that that's going to separate this centerpiece from the cluttered type buildings we're going to be adding in future videos. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment below, give me some feedback on future videos, and if you have naming suggestions for the things that we're building, drop those down below, and I hope you enjoyed.